Welcome, guys. Yo, today is our second podcast, and I am so happy to introduce a good friend of mine who's shown me a lot of cool things and has been just. I feel like he's my biggest fan just in my Discord, and since I've been started, and has just been 100% behind me. And yeah, man, I don't know. I don't even know if he's ready or not. I just sat down and was
I'm
like,
ready. I'm ready.
"Start talking." Um, but yeah, I'm so sorry for the inconvenience. But guys, please, 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 say hello to DMTR. DMTR, please say hello.
Hello, hello. I made
Awesome.
it.
How are you, man? How is everything?
I am doing kind of great. I think this will be a fun podcast, and just happy to be here
I
with all
do.
the Twitch friends and stuff.
I'm so happy that you're here too. This is something that we've been talking about doing for a really long time. Sorry, chat. I'm gonna close off you for a sec while we actually I can leave this up, and then whenever we get into stuff, then I'll switch over. But yeah, man, I'm so happy that we finally got the chance to do this. You've been hard at work on a lot of personal music stuff, and you've been kind of liberal with sharing us a lot of the things that you're working on, and actually had a couple recent releases. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
So yeah, my music journey kind of started accelerating very recently. Um, so last year, I was just kind of dabbling in my DAW, trying to get better. And somehow I managed to win a remix contest by LOJ, which kind of made me believe that my music isn't as bad as I was thinking. And I felt like maybe I should start streaming my production.
Yeah,
So yeah,
that's
and
super.
then you helped me with all the Twitch stuff and setting up.
Ah man, that was nothing. That was really just like anybody that wants to stream music or feels like they have something to share. I always want to encourage people to do that because you never know who you're going to inspire. And like it's crazy because like maybe 10 years down the line or something, or even 6 months or something, you might get a message from somebody that's like, man, thank you so much for the streams and for the information and stuff. Like you really set me off, and then now I'm like getting big and being signed to labels and all that stuff. And I'm like, dude, that yes, like that
Yeah,
is
and there's also so much knowledge you possess without even realizing, just by doing things that seem so normal to you, and then other people are like, "Dude, how
yeah.
did I
Like I
never
had
think
no
of this?"
idea that was a thing, right?
Mm,
Um, and I think that like in this case, especially like from some of the conversations that you and I had have had in the past, I think that I almost want to say like both of us have like first-handedly experienced that with each other, and that's why I'm really excited to have you on here. That's why I'm excited. I was excited to have Aspect on here last week because he showed us some really cool things, and I mean, really, like this podcast for one, I want to make sure that people know who you are because you, for one, you're a great person and you make fantastic music, but because you also have something that you want to share with everybody, and it's like, I think that we need to have a place for that because that's important. I mean, think
yeah,
about like 15 years ago when the only like resource that we had was either your friend that makes music or like dogsonacid.com or something, and now all these people are showing up, people like you, people like some of the other artists that I've done private lessons with, or whatever. And there's I really believe that there's going to be like a huge like musical revolution because of the information available today.
yeah, for sure. And also, Twitch community keeps growing at such a pace. It's amazing to see like bigger producers also taking the step to start actually streaming and stuff.
Right? And yo, like shout
Seems,
out to the Twitch community, man. Like you guys are the
yeah,
coolest people ever.
amazing guys.
So yeah, man. I heard a little bit about what you shared with us today. Do you want to give us a little bit of information about what you want to share?
Yeah, for sure. So I was thinking of doing some kind of small sound design tricks. I use a lot of my recent music, and then I was going to try to build all the information I give into like an explanation how I tackle swing in halftime, because it's a topic I talked about with you before. And
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it
It's
seems
something
like
that
such a fun thing to
I'm
talk
so
about.
sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, no
Um, I
problem.
I do think that like attaining specific rhythms in general is something that a lot of us struggle with, and it's like it's almost one of those things that you can always tell when somebody has it and when somebody doesn't.
Yeah.
You definitely have it, and this was something that you actually broke down for me personally, and it's a fantastic project that, with DMTR's permission, I will be uploading to the Discord. Um,
Yep.
I think, do I already? Is this the project that I already have?
Um, I included two projects, so both of them will I sent in the Google Drive, so everything will be available. I also stemmed both of these projects out for those of you who don't work in Ableton. So you still have access to the stems and you can see the kick and snare patterns and whatnot. So everything should be included.
So yeah, and that's super cool because for one, I've already had a chance to look at this, and so I kind of already have an idea about what we're getting into. But the fact that like you're providing us with some resources that, for one, like you could actually charge a lot of money for this, and you're choosing not to. But on the other side of things, I think that when people go back and they watch this and they're like, oh yeah, well I can actually go in and dive into this project and see what these people are talking about and stuff. It's going to be super awesome. Yeah, we could just totally steal the MIDI from this and then incorporate it into our project. And then, no, I'm just kidding. Don't do that. You won't learn anything. You could. You could, but it won't give you anything. But yeah, man. All right. So thanks again. And I'm about ready to get started if you are. So whenever you're ready, just go ahead and hop in and tell us what's going on. You can hear him now? Okay. So
Can hear him.
yeah, I think it was just a bug with
Oh,
OBS. Sorry about
yeah,
that.
no problem.
Okay. All right.
Just
So,
positive.
um, just so you guys know,
Small
as we were
recap.
catching up, DMTR gave a quick rundown about who he is and about like his recent artistry and stuff. He has got a lot of music that's coming out really soon, and I have the link in the banner up above here in case if you would like to go check his music out. And he's also streaming, so go check him out at DMTR Beats on Twitch. And today he's going to be showing and talking to us about some of the halftime rhythms and all that stuff that he's going to be talking to us about what he's really good at. So it's super
Hey.
exciting. He's shown me a piece of this project file before. This project will be available for all of you guys on the Discord as soon as the podcast is over. He's already sent it to me. I just have to link it. And it's going to be stuff that you guys can all dive into. Actually, you know what? Let's go ahead and hop on the Discord, because what if somebody actually wants to
Follow
follow,
along.
yeah, follow along.
Yeah,
So I
good
think I'm gonna
one.
go ahead and just link that, if you don't mind.
Mhm. There's also stems included for those who don't work in Ableton but still kind of want to look at what's
Is
happening.
is this the folder that we want to give out?
Uh, in Google Drive, it's like 4 folders, two
Okay,
projects and two
that's okay.
um,
I'll just throw this in
two
the
stems.
free stuff. So if you guys are part of the Discord, you guys can go and open up the project file on free stuff and go grab that. And then that way, if you guys want to follow along, then you're more than welcome to. I'm going to kind of just like sit back and just let him talk and learn. But some of you guys may want to interact and post questions. So I'm going
Yeah,
to close the chat on this. I'm going to have the chat up on my phone. And don't worry, I'm not ignoring you guys, but that way we can go full screen because I only have a single screen right now. So like before I hopped on the podcast, DMTR and I were doing a test, and then my power went out, and then I was like panicking at DMTR. I was like, oh my god, my power is out, my power is out. And so like I called my grandmother and was like, Grandma, I need to come over right now. And so I grabbed my laptop and then my interface and microphone and just like sped over here. So that's where we're at.
it worked out in the end though, so
It worked out. We're here. We're here. So,
no worries.
all right.
By the way, I
So,
also have chat pulled up, so if anyone has questions anytime, just hit me up.
yeah. So, yeah. All right. So, sorry about all of the distractions and stuff. I'm ready for you if you guys are ready. So, please feel free to begin whenever you're
Can
ready.
I check Ableton sound first? If they hear it.
I can hear it.
Chat, do you hear my Ableton? All right, perfect.
Cool. Dope.
So yeah, I'm gonna do a couple of like sound design tricks first. Some little things I like to use in my own music. I use more recently, and then I'll kind of transition all these different elements into like how to create a specific swing or kind of vibe, mostly related to halftime music. But I think you can like use these concepts in all genres of music, and it just depends on what you want to do with it. So yeah, this is the project. The first little trick I will show is kind of how to create easy melodic content with nice textures instead of the normal and regular pad sounds and chords and whatnot. And I'll make use of Ableton's granulator for this. Yeah, and I'll show you the result first. Then you have kind of an idea what I'm going to show you, and then I'll show you the technique itself. So here I have a group with a bunch of melodic elements. I just took some presets from Ableton. It contains a few pad sounds, a Foley layer, then a sample that's being looped, and a drum layer. And I'll show you all these different sounds together. So here are all the pad sounds. Then I have this Foley layer on top. And like a slow down break. The basic thing is, for this trick to be kind of useful, you need a couple of elements. So first of all, you definitely need some kind of pads or chords or whatever that you'll be able to loop in your granulator. And you also need to have some kind of drum or percussion going on, because they will actually create the textures on top of your melodic content. So this group over here, the melodics, is just an example. And like I said, you can do this trick on any kind of melodic loop you have. And yeah, basically what you do, yeah, if you have a question, make sure to stop me.
I do actually. So you were talking about drums throwing into the sampler. Now with those drums, actually we can just kind of figure this out. Can you just play that on its own for a hot sec?
Yeah, for sure.
So these drums in particular have a specific kind of processing to them that's more so like not necessarily like your main kick and snare, right? It's something that is more of I think the Whittler and Musar had a really good description for it. It's kind of like a motion, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No problem. I was just saying these drums are basically they're like breaks totally stretched out and then put through a grain delay, which creates like these weird kind of delay effects on top, which actually make the drum sound.
And for your personal preference, like, is this something that, like, do you want to have something that's kind of transient heavy, or do you think because of the melodic approach that you're trying to take, you generally want to leave something with heavy transients kind of out?
I think actually heavy transients would benefit this technique, and you'll hear why later on, because this technique is basically just looping certain grains or little parts of the main sample. So when you kind of loop on, let's say, a hi-hat, and you take like one small part and the transient is in the middle of the loop, it will create like a nice, how do I say this, texture on top of your melodic sound instead of being a hi-hat. But yeah, it's mostly the end result that will make you see why I'm doing this and why I'm using such kind of drums, etc.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, the first step is creating a melodic loop, preferably with some drums. Otherwise, this technique won't add that much to your melodic sounds at all. So I have this melodic loop running. And then it just kind of repeats with different chords. And then what I did is I recorded this section over here. Wait, I'll have to enable this. And that's basically where this trick starts. I have already applied this trick in this project, but I'll be doing it from the beginning, so everything seems...
If you guys know anything about my stream, you know that I love to sit in a granular synth for about 30 minutes out, and so this is kind of like right up our alley with this stuff.
So here is my copy of Granulator. So yeah, let me drag in this complete melodic loop in here. And then I'll go to my MIDI bindings and kind of bind my grain size, my file position, my spray and spread to 4 of my knobs. And it's just such a subtle and simple trick. But yeah, for some reason, it works really well. How long have you guys been producing? Oof, a couple of years. More like 7 years or so.
7 years, man.
Yeah, but my progression has been really weird. So my first 6 or 6.5 years, my progression was super slow. Then I got into Twitch and all its goodies with the whittler and stuff. And yeah, that made my production improve super fast.
I think I got started in 2013, so I guess I'm not too far behind you. Yeah, I broke my ankle at a tricking competition and was like, well, what am I going to do with my life? And so I bought a machine and was like, I guess it's time to start making music.
Guess it's that time. So yeah, I recorded this whole melodic loop. I pulled it in a granulator. And then I just play like the root notes, just plays the original sample. You can do this in other pitches, of course. This is just like the basic templates I'm showing. And what I'll be doing is I will try to find a looping point using my grain size. And I'll do 2 kinds of recordings. I'll do one recording with fast looping, with a shorter grain size, so the loop goes faster. And then I'll do one recording with a slower loop or a bigger grain size. The spray and file position for this technique, I'll keep them at 0, and my spread is just turned up a little bit, just not all the way up. And this is the kind of loop I'll be going for. So let me set this to this amount. So now I have this loop going, and I'll just start recording in an audio track. All right. And what I'll be doing is I'll start in the beginning of this sample and I'll slowly browse with the file position through the sample. Yeah, I just hold the same key on the keyboard. So just it's C1, I think, which just plays the original sample. You can do this pitched up, pitched down. But right now I'm showing like the basic technique, and you can apply any other notes or whatever to this.
Quick question: before you start scanning through some of the samples, will you do us a favor and maybe gain stage the granulator about -6 dB so we can hear you talking over the noise?
Like this.
Much love. Thank you.
No problem. Is this better?
Yeah, that's perfect.
All right. So I'm gonna hit record over here. Make sure this is soloed, otherwise everything else will be playing. And then I'll just browse through the sample for loops like this. So as you can hear, there's like a little snare being looped over and over above the bad sound, and if you combine all these different loops together, you'll get like a weird texture going. And then you just slowly scan throughout the whole sample. Make sure if you have a certain chord progression going on, you have a couple of loops of every chord, because you want to be able to combine them later.
Hold on, can we? I'm sorry. Actually, once you're done, I actually want to talk about this topic for just a second, if you don't mind, because you just said something that was really, really important that I think is going to be really beneficial to people.
All right.
So I'm so glad that you just said that, because I think that in terms of like having an idea, right, of like how to, before we even get into using all of this in context, so to kind of summarize, you have this chord progression or this melodic idea, and you throw it into a granular synth. But one thing that you're already keeping in mind from the get-go is that you already have a particular chord progression that you can use all of these glitch textures and stuff to complement the progression that's already part of the tune. So
Exactly.
in essence, like, there's not a right or wrong way to do this, but I think that, like, as far as like just as a means of trying this out as a new sound design tool, you can kind of keep in mind that you can reuse this stuff with the same chord progression, as opposed to feeling like you need to create new content down the line. And
Exactly.
I guess like once you get a little bit more experienced, or once you feel comfortable with it, you can always create new stuff. Like we had some questions in chat that were like, do you hold the same key, and do you play different stuff? And the answer is like, of course, like it always depends, right? Because it's really just like what you like. But when you're first exploring on this, I think that it's important to just try octaves for now, so that way everything is kind of in the same key. And then you can like branch out and try a fifth, and then try a seventh, and then try something that's harmonically within the same realm as the original idea that you already had. Sorry, DMTR, I'm so sorry for interrupting you.
No problem. No problem.
I just thought that
Great
was
explanation.
Please continue. Sorry about that.
So so basically what Alchemy is saying, like how I understand this, I'm explaining like the basic, like the complete basic technique I'm using, but of course I won't be using it this exact way. There are multiple ways of using this, and you're free to experiment and do whatever with it. So I'm gonna finish browsing through the sample here, and then we'll get going.
It's super pretty.
Yeah, but as you can hear, the drum sample is actually way quieter than all the pads I have going on. Because if your drums are actually the main focus, you won't get really that texture kind of sound, but it will actually be hi-hats playing and stuff. So you just want to make sure your gain stage your drums are right.
So make your percussion more quiet than the melodic elements, right?
Yeah, because like the focus of this technique is to create melodic content, and it's not actually to create rhythmic content. If you want to create rhythmic stuff with Grand later, I would do completely different stuff, like create an actual drum beat with basses and stuff. This is just mainly focused on melodic content.
Have you ever considered bouncing out, because I see that you bounced out the group, but have you ever considered bouncing that out with a Ghost sidechain, so that way you already have rhythmic content that will complement the drums as well?
That would be great as well. I haven't tried it.
I haven't either, but you gave me that idea.
So here I'm entering like the second chord. And after you're done scanning, what I'll be doing is I'll just go to the beginning, and I'll do the same process, but set my grain size like a little bit faster, not too fast. So I basically have two recordings, one with a slower loop and one with a faster loop of the same content.
I really like how you're organizing this too, because you're only turning a specific parameter because you know like what this is going to sound like and in some point, right? As opposed to like
Yeah.
twisting all the knobs and seeing what you get and like scrubbing through it, you're kind of already setting yourself up for something that you know is going to work.
Yeah, for sure. It's like, especially on granular synthesis, I feel like it's hard to kind of manipulate a lot of parameters and create something useful if you're not really comfortable or experienced using the plugin. So I myself would say I'm not really too experienced with using granulators, so I'll try to stay away from using like a lot of different parameters because I know I won't be creating anything useful out of it.
Yeah. Remind me, after this podcast, I'm going to send you a rack, and it's something that I think would be really fun for you to play with. That is kind of already set up in Granulator too, to where it will be a little bit more controllable, but also a little bit more on the experimental side. Should be really fun for you.
All right, great. So yeah, I'll just try to take out this whole recording, and I'll show you how I'll use this in a track. So the reason why I'm really showing this technique is because most of the time I see a lot of producers kind of getting stuck in like a loop mindset. They'll create like a cool drop loop, and it's kind of hard to create like intros, breakdowns, and stuff. And me myself, I actually find this particular technique to kind of help me not get stuck on writing melodic content for my tracks. So when I'm writing a track, it's hard to sometimes come up with chords and whatnot. And I feel like this technique can certainly help, because you can use this on any of your old work in progresses you have flying around. Just bounce them out, put them in Granulator, and yeah, you have some stuff to go with.
That's a fantastic idea. And I think like while you're setting that up, one really cool thing to note about this too is that like with this particular kind of music that you make, like I'm pretty sure that everybody in here knows who DMTR is and the kind of music that you make. And I think that like having this approach sets the precedent for like how to implement a specific kind of melodic content, right? Because what that means to a lot of people might be really different. Like some people might want to just reach for a piano and then write out a chord progression and then try to make that fit, but still have like a heaviness of the tune. Some people might do something entirely different of that sort. But having this as an idea is something that you know is going to be, you know it's going to work because it kind of complements the style of music that you make.
Yeah, exactly. And the inspiration for this technique was actually a combination of like hearing G. Jones's tracks and watching EPROM's stream in December, I think. He introduced me to all of the granulator stuff at first, but then I was kind of listening closely to some of G. Jones' tracks, and I noticed his melodic elements always had this nice little texture on top, and I was like, wait, how does he do that? And then I just messed around and found this little technique.
Yeah, it's super cool.
But yeah, I'll show you how it works. So right now I have two recordings, one with a slower motion and one with a faster motion. What I'll be doing is I'll try to look for, I think I have two chords in my melodic loop, so I'll try to get two slow parts for my first chord and two fast parts, and two slow parts for my second chord and two fast parts for my second chord, just so I have a little bit of variation and I can create like a 4-bar loop with this.
Interesting.
There we have one. Also, if you're on your granulator, you find a nice point where you're looping, just let it play out for a little bit, because you'll notice sometimes it's handier to have like longer stretched out samples and actually trying to stretch them out yourself. So if you have like enough material to work with. All right, and then I think here's my transition. This is a nice one. Have to copy paste. And then another one. There we go. Maybe I'll take. Yeah, here's the pad resolved. All right. So these are my slow recordings. Then I'll scan through my fast. Perfect. Right. Also make sure if you have some kind of base layer or a lower pad running underneath this, if the, how do I say this, if the spread is pulled all the way up, you have, of course, some bass frequencies in your sides, so make sure to EQ them out to, because you don't really want your melodic stuff to interfere with all your low ends. So yeah, just be mindful of that. All right, I think I have enough. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right. And then I'll set up a little loop. And now it's just using this stuff. So, whoops. So the reason I took one of these slow and fast recordings is because I like to alternate between them. So here I'll show you an example. This is a fast loop playing first. Then I have a slow one playing first. You can also reverse these if you prefer that. And you can do this at any different speed, like any kind of speed. But the thing is, this is just a basic principle, and this is how I use it. So right now I have one fast playing and then one slow.
And as far as like how fast that rhythm is oscillating, like is that something that you even care about, or?
I really don't care about it. So it can just be out of my rhythm of the track. It doesn't really matter, because in a later stage we will be layering this on top of our original melodic stuff. So it will just kind of sound like extra texture, and doesn't really define the rhythm or interfere with any drums we have going on. So,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Cool.
Right. See that it's kind of the same length. There we go. And then I need a fast one of this and this. And then it's just basically completing our original chord progression. I have already done this. I'm just showing how to like easily do this.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's not really that I'm kind of thinking about oh no, this isn't gonna sound great or anything. It's just basically experimenting and hoping it sounds well. So this is what we end up with. Wait, I have to switch this one around.
Yeah, that's super cool. And so because that still has its own rhythm in the background, regardless of like the time signature that it's in, you have this continuous melody that's playing that kind of just it almost like enhances it because it is kind of off, but it works so well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so the next step is trying to get the most out of what we created over here. And I'll just be duplicating this layer. I'll select all these samples over here, and I'll just be pitching these up 1 octave, but just create an EQ, so I'm not really interfering much. And I also need to get rid of my low end over here. So yeah, this is like the basic technique. So this is what we end up with. You can duplicate this as many times as you want. Try to find like nice extra notes on top, fifths, sevenths, increase the chord patterns and whatnot by pitching these samples around and duplicating them. And yeah, I'll show you how I use this in this project. So I'll just put these away for a minute.
And just to recap, you made sure to, on the granulator, you made sure to bounce out a portion, or at least one portion of your entire chord progression that you've already had.
Exactly. So in the original loop, there's 2 chords playing. So this is the same chord, and then it transfers to the second chord. So basically, I made sure. Can we see your chord MIDI? Of course. Knowledge also, these projects are free to grab in Alchemy's Discord. So if you go to free stuff, you can just follow along and just look at the project yourself.
Yeah, Knowledge is on the Discord.
So yeah, here are the pads I'm playing. It's really nothing fancy. I just put this together late night. And then I have a Foley layer. Here is a main pad. I think this is what actually defines the chord itself. It's like an angelic chord, but it just loops the same thing over and over. It's actually the pads changing the chord.
That's cool.
So that's like the basic principle. And now how do I implement this into a track? So as you can see, I created 3 layers for this granular thing. So these are just the recordings I did beforehand. So this is a low version. I have a mid and a high version also.
And by low, mid, and high, in this scenario,
these are just the pitches.
Yeah, that's the original, and then the mid is a higher octave, and the high is a higher octave.
7.
Oh, sorry, seventh.
And
sorry.
12. Yeah.
Okay.
So this is actually playing a different note. It sounds completely off when you play it solo.
It's still cool.
Just yeah. So as you can see, this on its own is completely like out of key with the whole thing. But then it's just a matter of finding the right EQ to actually make use of the textures and not really fundamental sounds of the chord and the pads. So I just EQ'd those pads out over there and kind of made use of like the dissonance between the textures and the top layer to add or enhance the original stuff. So then the next step is to kind of layer this with your original melodic stuff. So here I did the same kind of principle with the loop. So I created the same rhythm, but instead of putting it through a granulator, I just took my original sample, and it sounds like this. Doesn't really do much, but the loop point always starts at the same time as my granulator touch.
That sounds so
So
freaking cool.
when you layer this together with the granulator, you get like a complete melodic movement thing. And it's really easy to create intros and stuff with this. And yeah, that's the melodic content creator, or how should I name this?
Can we talk about for just a quick second about like the overall nature of like where your melodies come from? Because
For
and I think
sure.
this is something that Nalith would actually appreciate because you guys have like a similar melodic musical approach. Um, do you like what are some what kind of music like inspires you like outside of like halftime and stuff? Because I always feel like you've even said it yourself, you know, like you're like the halftime mummy of the electronic scene, and I love it, and it all sounds good. But is that just kind of what came natural to you, or
Um, it's actually a really good question. My inspirations come from a lot of places. Yeah, game music, of course. So OSTs from um, games, films, anime, whatever, have an inspiration on me. Also, recently I started really digging into experimental music. Artists like Ital Tech, Heezen, she's a vocalist who makes dark pop, really inspires my melodic stuff.
any chance that you
Um,
could post that name in the chat for everyone?
yeah, for sure.
You don't have to post a link, but just post the name of those artists because I'm curious too. I'm even curious as to like what games specifically inspire you. I think Ico was one of them, right? Or
Yep,
Shadow of the Colossus.
yeah, they're so these are three artists that really kind of inspire me melodic wise. For games, there's actually a trilogy: Ico, Shadow of the Colossus, and The Last Guardian. It's yeah from the same company, and the composer who made that music is just yeah
Super
outstanding.
cool. Thank you for sharing that with us.
And The Last Guardian. Um, so yeah, um, these are like some of my inspirations, but like I said, I get inspired by so much people and things and whatnot. I listen to Lorne a lot now. That's also a name you could put up there.
Yeah.
I actually have a project I kind of made inspired by Lorne recently. I might show this later on.
Nolan already asked, have you listened to, or were you responding to him, or did that
Yeah, I
just
was
was?
responding them.
Okay, I thought that was like a
I have
natural
the chat
thing.
pulled up.
I was like, wait, what?
Uh,
That's dope.
but yeah, Lorne is a god. He's amazing. And also, I get inspired by anyone who sends me music. So um, there are a lot of people, I think, in Twitch chat. Nalit is one of those persons. I just ask them to send me music, and it inspires me, so it
Yeah.
keeps me going.
And it's really easy to like take a second right here to like brag about you for a sec, but if you guys aren't part of my Discord, like DMTR eventually, and not that I'm putting pressure on you to make sure that you go back and catch up or whatever,
Sorry.
but just from your track record, he's been one person. Well, there's been several people, but he's been one of the many people in my Discord that like actually go and write out paragraphs and really critically listen to people's music and try like does a really good job of like giving both creative and technical feedback. Um, so
Yeah.
he has a great ear with all that stuff, but I just wanted to take a moment to like say thank you for that because even though you're in my Discord, I still appreciate the fact that you do that because it's not something that you have to do. But I think that it will also help you get better at your music because you're listening to so many different things of inspiration and thinking about how every single idea and context can come together. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize with giving feedback in music, even if you're not that experienced. It's not about the feedback itself, it's about looking at
Yeah.
something and being like, okay, well, how can this be improved objectively? And then what can we add in as a subjective idea to improve not just whoever it is music that we're listening to, but reflect that on our own, right? Because it puts us in a problem solving position.
Framer. But yeah, Alchemy is totally right. So I give a lot of feedback. It kind of depends on how much time I'm spending on my own music. So sometimes it may take a few days before I get to people. Sometimes there's just too much music. I just can't give everyone feedback. But I always try to give a solid piece of advice. If I can't do it in like Discord, I'll try to private message or something, and like really analyze stuff. And it's not just that I'm doing the feedback for other people, but it's basically like like a helpful experience for me, because a lot of times when I'm giving feedback, I'm actually improving myself more than I'm trying to improve the other person, because I'm learning so much from analyzing their music, their mistakes or their decisions. And yeah,
I mean,
that's why I try
honestly,
to.
like for you guys out there that I've heard some people say that they're like, well, I don't want to give feedback because I'm inexperienced, or I don't want to give feedback because I don't know anything or whatever. It's kind of like the saying that advice is advice, even if it's not good advice. What we're trying to do is not tell people how to write music. What we're really looking forward to doing is giving somebody a new perspective to interpret what they're thinking. And I think that's
Exactly.
honestly the ultimate answer to those of you guys who are like having beat block, is that we just need some kind of change to perspective. And I'm saying this to myself because I go through beat block just as much as you guys do, if not more. But sometimes somebody gives you a different perspective that even if the advice is terrible, it might have the potential to spark something new. The flip side of that though is like, don't be a jerk and be like, well, I don't know anything about music, but it sucks, or I don't know anything about music, but it's
No.
cool. You know what I mean? Like really try to take the time to think and respond and be honest with yourself, because again, this is kind of like the next piece of advice that I have on this topic is be selfish with your feedback. And what I mean by that is treat it like it's your own tune. Um,
Mhm.
I mean, with being respectful, of course, but with that mindset, you're going to be looking for how to, like, of course, you're going to insert some of your bias in there and stuff, which is, inevitable. But if you treat it like that, then you don't have to analyze your own music anymore. You don't have to, or at least in that moment, you don't have to, like put yourself in that position. You could just be like, yo, like, all right, this is a tune, this is a collab that we're all working on, right? Or whatever. And it comes into a skill building mindset as opposed to, you know, just giving somebody a tip or two and feeling like you're obligated to,
Mhm.
project that out. Does that make sense? I feel like that's kind of abstract, but it's a good mindset to come into when you're trying to improve on music, but you don't know how.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I totally agree. Also, for me, giving feedback is not something I feel like obligated to do. I just like doing it, and I'm actually looking forward to giving some people feedback. Because yeah, I I kind of put like a lot of value to my feedback, even though I don't know if it's great or not. Because yeah, most of the time you don't even get a decent response. But um, like when the feedback, yeah, it can actually mean like getting people to finish a track, or like them abandoning the project and never looking at it again. Like, yeah, kind of makes a big deal in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, it should matter, Everybody's music matters. I talked about this. I can't remember how many times I've said it, but like, yo, like the amount of things that have to go right in order for someone to finish a track are so
Hmm.
substantial. Like every
Yeah.
single song that you finish is a miracle. Because it
Hmm.
takes like thousands and thousands and thousands of decisions to get to that point, no matter your skill level. And
Yeah,
on that
exactly.
fundamental level, like we all are doing the same thing, even though our expression is different. We shape different
Hmm.
expressions, and that's where our artistry comes in. But at the end of the day, we're all making music.
Yeah, totally. Um, Yeah. If you want to jump to the next subject,
Yeah, sorry,
I'm
tangent.
ready. No, no problem. Yeah, because I got quite a lot of stuff to do, I think. I just want to showcase as much as I can. So the next thing I'd like to talk about, and like I said, these are all little things I'll be showing, but in the end, they'll all like um, form something together, and you'll hear where I'm going to. Um, so the next thing I'll be talking about is my drum processing. I think Alchemy has talked about this on his stream quite a lot already.
I
Because
have a
it's
preset. I actually have several presets that are specifically named DMTR drums, DMTR snare, DMTR kick. So if you guys ever see me do drum processing, I've kind of combined some of my own elements with
Mhm.
most of what he is getting ready to show us here because it's a really different way
Yeah.
to go about drum design, but it's so cool. So this is where you want to take notes. You should be
Mhm.
taking notes the entire time, but this is like
Yeah, and it gets really weird, and you'll see things that, yeah, don't actually, most people like don't do this stuff. So yeah, um, I'll just get an example first, because yeah, it's like a really weird process, and for me, it goes different every time I do this, and it's just a set of effects I'm applying, and yeah, the order is always different, and yeah, it just depends on the sound itself. What does DMTR stand for? DMTR is actually my real name, Dimitri, and yeah, that's basically what it stands for. So you can call me DMTR, Dimitri, whatever you prefer. Um, but yeah, I'll show you the technique first. So first of all, what I'll be doing is I'll just go through, this is just a sample folder with Ableton's stock stuff. And I'll just type in kick and just scroll through the thing, and yeah, until I find something usable. And I don't really mind what specific sound it is actually.
if you don't use the alchemy kick, DMTR, I swear. I'm just kidding.
I could actually apply this to an alchemy kick if you prefer.
That would be with that. Welcome back, everybody. Sorry about that. DMCR was just talking about he's getting ready to go into drum design. So again, sorry for the interruption. Please feel free to continue.
Hello, hello. So yeah, I'm going to show you my drum processing, and it's actually a process you can like apply to any sound that you like. So it isn't really restricted to drums, in my opinion. That's where I came up with like this creation or whatever. So for a beginning sound, I chose Alchemy's Doof, because Nalit asked about it. Whoa, that's really loud. And there's like a couple of effects I'll be using. So I'm just gonna drag these in, explain why I use them, how did I use them, and then yeah, the process will be much easier to follow.
And while he's setting that up, this is something he kind of stated before, but he also does this not only with kicks and snares, but with percussion as well. So if you have any kind of drum element that you want to process and make really heavy, this kind of just general guideline is a really great way to get the most out of your percussive elements.
Yeah, wait, I'm actually gonna duplicate this and do the Alchemist kick later, because I actually want like a shitty sound to kind of showcase the power of this technique. This will do. So there are a couple of things. I'll just explain why I put these in, and how you can make easy use of them. So I have to disable all these first. All right. So first I'm gonna drag an EQ in here, just so I can see what my kick looks like on a frequency spectrum. So as you can see, I have like one big peak of high-end frequencies over here. I'm just gonna saturate this kick a little bit, a decent amount. Just before the point where you actually start hearing like the distortion on the high end. Then I'll be applying a drum bus. The drum bus basically is a transient shaper for me. So I also enable the compression, but you can achieve the same thing with any transient shaper. Alchemy does this with his Bitwig transient shaper, I think. All right. Then I'll be cutting out these lows because I don't need them. And after that, I'll be using my glue compressor. And I'm just gonna clip this really hard. And just going to EQ out some highs. Maybe even cut them out. All right. Add a little bit of multi-band compression. Add another glue compressor. And maybe even an EQ in between. All right. So I'll kind of explain what I did over here. So this is my basic sound, and it's like the original like goal of this effect chain was to create like doofs. Like Alchemy's kick is called a doof, and I don't really know the exact word for it. But in halftime music, the drums always have like a specific sound, and I notice a lot of people, like Ivy Lab and stuff, they kind of tend to use the doof sound, or how should I call this? And this effect rack, or these kind of effects, basically accomplish this with almost any sound. So you can create like you can like create doofs out of anything you put through this. So first of all, I used a saturator just to kind of distort my high end a little bit, because like the kick had some white noise on top of it, and I wasn't really a fan of the sound. Then I used this drum bus as a transient shaper. I EQ'd some highs and lows out of it because we didn't really have any use for them. This glue compressor is basically compression and a clipper, a soft clipper. So you can use any combination of compression and clipping at the same time. Then I have a multi-band compression after this, just to create like a nice balance between mids, highs, and lows, and a little bit of an EQ, again with a slight bit of compression at the end. So these are the effects I mainly use. They go in all different kinds of orders and stuff, but these are their main purposes. And then there is one funny little trick I like to use, and that's using a frequency shifter. And this is where things get kind of weird, and why Framer was looking at my EQ like, what are you doing?
It's forbidden.
It's forbidden. But you'll notice what I'll be doing. Like the order of the frequency shifters and the EQs doesn't really matter. But basically what I'll be doing is create new fundamentals out of with the use of like a frequency shifter. So as you can see, I have my kick fundamental frequency around 43 hertz. He has a voice. Oh yeah, Collie, welcome. And basically, if you have a kick in your track, you just want to make sure either you're sidechaining quite hard if your kick is like overlapping with your sub main frequency, like the root note of your track or something. Or you can yeah.
I'm sorry. Just before you move on, to clarify, I think if I'm not mistaken, what you mean with your really hard sidechain is have a long release time.
Yeah. Okay. And just make sure you have to think. I think about it like this. So if I have my sub at, let's say, 40 hertz, and my kick is also playing at 40 hertz, to make them work together, I'll have to sidechain way more than if my kick frequency, like the fundamental, is sitting at 50 hertz, because they won't be in like direct competition with each other. So this trick is basically used to create like fundamentals at any frequency you like. They won't always sound great, but it's certainly a thing you can experiment with and create like super nice drums. So this technique is based around a frequency shifter, and we'll be using this to generate soaring key. I really don't think about such things now. I think most of my kicks are out of key in most of my tracks, or not purposely on key. They're mostly centered between the like sub fundamental, so where my sub is playing the most, and then like the first fundamental of my mid bass, or the first fundamental of the second harmonic of my sub or something, or the first harmonic. It's just I'm trying to dodge a lot of low end space there, because it's very easy to overdo things over there. So this frequency shifter will be used to pitch kicks down, and then you'll notice that our fundamental frequency is like not visible anymore, because it was at 40 hertz or something. We pitched it down 174 hertz, so it's actually gone. But to create a new fundamental, I'll actually use a gigantic boost over here to create the impression of a new fundamental.
It's so cool, man.
Out of all the noise, and then you have to make sure you EQ this right. But if I group these together, yeah, it's very nice trick, guys. I highly recommend you playing around with this. But then the even cooler thing is if you set up these boosts right. So I'm hoping this will sound halfway decent. You can start like pitching around your kick with the frequency shifter to points where it actually sounds nice. So I'm kind of confident my fundamental frequency will be decent, or will be. And then it's just about finding the right spot. As you can see, the moment you go really low with your frequency shifter, you have to add another boost. So I'll just duplicate this until I'm at this point. Right now I'm more in like 808 territory.
And while he's working on this, kind of like what's happening here is that like when you do these boosts to these EQs, you're doing some kind of digital distortion to these things. But the fact is that because there's still frequency content in this area, regardless of the frequency shifter, he's basically forcing a fundamental of his choice, or just I guess basically what sounds good to him.
Yeah. And so the fundamental of your kick will be like the fundamental you choose to like boost on your EQ. So this actually doesn't really have an impact on the fundamental or the frequencies of my kick, because I'm actually forcing it with these EQs.
For 1 second, can you double click on the EQ to make the big screen pull up?
Like this one?
Yeah, on the grid. So in case if you guys didn't know, if you double click and you get on this screen, if you look at the bottom left of the screen, you can actually see the pitch that that's in. So if you're trying to
Yep.
choose a fundamental, then you can go and choose like
Yep.
a specified desire, and then actually backwards work this with the frequency shifter to kind of make things line up. If you're like, I want to kick an F, and then you can kind of place that there, if that makes sense.
Exactly. So yeah, that's a great catch. So also you can apply this to when you have your track playing. Um, Here you can look at the spectrum, kind of see where my sub is playing, where my next like big frequency bunch is going, and then you can kind of like try to snipe your boosts in between those and create a kick that's actually sitting between a lot of frequencies instead of right on top of your sub bass, where you have to use a lot of sidechain or things to get around with. Um, yeah,
Did you just say snipe?
yeah.
That's
I
amazing.
don't know.
You just snipe
Um,
that frequency. You need that. That's
but
yeah.
the thing is, my English vocabulary isn't the greatest, so
No, no, that
sometimes
wasn't a
you'll hear
knock.
some
That
funny
was a
things.
great choice of words because it's kind of true. Because you're
Um,
pinpointing it, you know. But
yeah,
that's
yeah,
freaking awesome.
exactly. Pinpointing. That's what I was trying to go for. But yeah, this is the basic method. So the thing is, this frequency shifter and these EQs, you can put these kind of anywhere in the chain as long as they're before your like huge clipper. Because the thing is, these boosts actually sound halfway decent because I'm like clipping this really hard and putting it through multi-band compression. If I were to disable these, I don't think all my height will be almost gone.
DMTR, do you have an oscilloscope on hand?
Oh damn, I don't think so.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah.
We can always like do a follow up to this in the future and stuff.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
one thing that I wanted to bring to attention when you guys are controlling transients is the glue compressor with the soft clipping, because while it does act as a soft clipper, it's actually going to change your transient in a different way than a normal soft clipper. I think you were here with me when we were like doing that whole thing,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
But in this case, like having a big transient is totally fine. But just if you guys are like talking about clipping and stuff in general, just keep that in mind.
Yep. Yeah, so like I don't have a lot of tools. Mainly all of my stuff comes from Ableton itself. So yeah, I'm not equipped with all the fancy stuff. So yeah.
You don't need fancy
Um,
stuff, man.
you don't need fancy stuff. But yeah, that's the main process. Like I'll show you the process I did for this example. This is the original. This is the new kick. Like I said, you can create like any sound with this, but this is why there's like these weird cues where you're like, what is he doing? He's boosting so much, but it's all being taken care of because it's me finding new fundamental frequencies. So this process doesn't only work for kicks, it also works for snares, other percussion, and it's a really fun way to do your drum design actually.
Honestly, man, like from the first time you showed me this, like you totally changed my outlook on percussion. And if you've seen some of the stuff that I've been doing with like the reverb transient shaping and stuff now, like a lot of that comes from this. And I think that like that's part of one of the reasons why I was so excited for you to show us this today. Because for one, I wanted to come from you, but beyond that, like this right here, guys, like totally changed my production in the percussive world. Like totally changed it. So I really encourage you guys to like go back and watch the VOD when it comes up and all that stuff, and like really give this a try, because it will you know we talk about like heavy drums and that stuff that we hear in Ivy Lab and the heavy hitting stuff and all that. This is one way. It's not the only way, but this is a fantastic way for you guys to achieve that. So DMTR, like before you go on, like I just wanted to thank you for showing us this, because for
No
me
problem.
personally, like this changed so much.
And yeah, the reason why I think this method is actually very helpful for most people is because right now I have the feeling, and I can be completely wrong, but that a lot of like newer producers are, when they're going for drums, they actually try to aim for the best sample out there. So they'll just browse through kick samples until they find something they actually like. And I think this method is one way to create something decent out of like any sound. So
Yeah, and it puts you in a
uh,
position to where like you can just be like, all right, well, I'm just gonna freaking close my eyes and grab a kick and then just make
mhm,
it work, you know? And once you practice it enough, like literally, I'm so surprised at how well this works because you can take the poopiest kick as long as it has some kind of
exactly.
frequency content in it and make something interesting out of it. And even if it becomes a little bit different, like that still makes it unique in its own right because of
Mhm.
the processing that you're doing to it. But I think like you guys always hear me talk about like learning your tools and stuff, but what he's doing is he's using distortion and forcing distortion actually out of the EQ and shaping it with a transient shaper to create a drum because that's what it is. A drum has a transient, it has a body and a tail, and this right here kind of gives you all the parameters that you need in order to control like ideally the perfect drum. And then the samples that you choose to throw into it are just the extra character.
Yep, exactly.
Because honestly, I think that like if you have I think even if you had just a sine wave with a little bit of harmonics, because obviously like a single harmonic is a little bit harder to deal with, you'd have to do more distortion. But even if you had something with just a little bit more, you can still use that and create like a pretty decent kick out of it.
I'll just try it out. So we'll just drag in some other samples and see how it sounds. But I think most of them will sound fairly similar. So if I search for another kick,
Tasty. And like to me, like all of these work. These are all
yeah,
fantastic.
it really doesn't. Yeah, this is maybe a bit too weird,
That's
but
cool. It's still cool.
like this is the original. Like you can drag almost anything into this template and you can make it work because like a kick consists of some fundamental like elements, and if you can control all these separately and just force them in some kind of way, like the sample that you put into this doesn't really matter in my opinion. So this is a really handy way to create some things about like out of any sample, because I don't really need kicks. I can just drag in me talking, create a kick out of it. Like anything is possible.
I'm telling you
um,
guys, this is the sauce. It's
um,
the sauce. This is the gold.
this is the same rack, but then used for a snare. This is just, I don't know what the original sounds like. And I made like a high-pitched reverb snare out of this. It's just the same rack as the kick, nothing fancy. Yeah, I could do this to Dove as well, and force something else out of it. But yeah, he basically did the process already, so it should sound like a Dove, I think. I'll give it a go. One more quick variation. Need my frequency shifter. Whoops. The thing is, when you get in these really low regions, you really have to like copy paste this boost like 4 or 5 times, otherwise you completely lose out your
At least with kicks.
yeah.
For some reason, snares, like you could lower it by like 1K and still get something out of it.
Mm-hmm. All right, but yeah, this is just a quick example. There we go.
Yeah, and it has that nice little sizzle on the top end now.
Mm-hmm. Original. All right, So yeah, quick example, same effect, same process. But yeah, that's like a nice little drum chain. You can use this on any sound plugs. I sometimes use this on bass steps even, to give them like the impression of being a kick, but actually they're just bass steps, and I might show you an example of that later on.
One quick thing since we're still on this subject, can you talk about like how you implement reverb on your snares within this chain? Because I know that's something that's a little bit different when you talk about kicks versus
Yeah.
your snares.
So reverb, I use this in two different ways. Either I just use it like the standard way, just after my effect chain. I put up the pre-delay, a little bit of dry wet, and it's at the end of my chain. But recently I've been trying to actually put the reverbs at the beginning of my chain and actually make them go through all these effects together with my sound. So they're actually going through the boosts, frequency shifters, and whatnot. And yeah, just a fun way to experiment with it.
You get some gnarly sounds out of it. Try it yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Like even just creating a chain and you feel like you're happy with the sound, just experiment around with just dragging and dropping these effects in different orders, because there's always crazy stuff happening there.
Right. Cool. Thanks so much. I just wanted to touch on that, just because even though you get the transient and the bodies of this in the same way with your tail and stuff, if you noticed on his particular snare that he had, there was some nice space on there that he sent at the beginning of the chain. Because we could have easily just been like, yeah, just throw some reverb on it. But I think having you guys see the placement of where that was in this particular chain will give you some context of how to do that when you guys are making this yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And then my next subject will be the most easy and most straightforward thing, and that's sine noise bases. Who doesn't love them? And just a quick example of how I use them and what I do with them. So like the most basic sound is just having your sine wave, adding white noise on top. And I'll just add white noise until I can barely hear it, so don't overdo this. And then my next step will be dragging in saturator. You can use any other distortion or whatever plugin that you like. And after that, I'll pull no DT. I'm gonna drag down the highs over here, just for the sake of not overdoing stuff. And then I'll be ramping up the drive over here until the point the white noise actually starts to sound like distortion instead of white noise. So over here, enable soft clip. Then what I'll do is I'll activate my glides, put my voices to 1, just so I can play some easy melodies with this. And then I can bring up the highs depending on how much I want these to have. So this is the basic sound. Some fun things you can experiment with is putting a reverb before your saturator, putting a dry wet all the way up.
And so sorry, just so you guys notice, he put a low cut on his sub on the input processing, so don't put reverb on your low end.
Exactly. So here I'm actually going to cut out my side signal at, let's say, 150 hertz. Because I actually don't want stereo sub. And then you can play around with your reverb. You can also put this behind your saturator.
That sounds so cool.
Also, fun thing, if you create sounds like this, always try to check them out in the high register, because you can create some cool leads just by creating cool basses. Like, it's free
So
leads.
would you split this chain, or would you use that as Would
I
you
would
use that?
split this chain. So
Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
like you can see over here the mid bass is split from my sub. The sub doesn't really need all this processing, but I do this at the end of my process. So I'm just processing until I'm happy with my mid bass.
Hmm.
Then I'll split the signal, make my sub mono, and it's mostly a split at like 100 hertz. And then I can like make my mid bass wider and stuff. But yeah, it's a fun thing to play around with. Also, short little technique. Didn't really plan on showing this, but why not? Easy pad sounds.
Secrets.
Using reverb with distortion, and like absolutely ripping them. And here I put up the decay really high. Put up the drive all the way up until the point it starts to sound distorted when I'm actually pressing the note, but it starts to fade away into the original sound when the reverb is playing. So right now it's distorted, I let go of it, and now it's just the basic reverb of my original sound. And if you apply this technique to pad sounds and other effects, you can create some really nice atmospheric sounds for like your intros, breakdowns, and whatnot.
Super cool.
Oops. So yeah, that's that. So in this example, these are the sounds I came up with. We have a sidechain going on, so that's why they're moving. And this is like the more standard. And I think these are kind of tricks I wanted to show. So yeah, I'll just show you the combination I came up with, and then we'll dive into the next project, which is the variations of halftime swing. So yeah, this is like the combination of the melodic stuff, the drum processing, and the basses. I know it's turning after reverb. It's illegal. It isn't the greatest thing, but just a little showcase of what I think.
I'll be right back. I have to go change my pants.
But yeah, so that's the basic stuff. These are 4 elements playing. It's a bass, a pluck, kick, and snare, and you can see, yeah, just how much fun you can have with this. But now I'm going to show you how to actually create these kind of loops and how I came to be with all my halftime stuff and whatnot. Well, I'm gonna save this. Blanco. Yeah, Blanco, by the way, Framer is from the Netherlands, and I also hit him up with a friend of mine, and his alias is Blanco. He's a good friend of mine here in Belgium, and so
That's
yeah,
awesome.
he kind of introduced me, or he like forced me to go into electronic music production, and kind of forced me into halftime music. He was like, dude, why don't you try out halftime music? And I was like, all right.
And then here you are. making
Here I am.
freaking super bangers. Yo, by the way, before we go on, shout out to Framer. He just released a new tune. He posted on the Discord. So
Dude.
if you guys get a if you guys get a chance, go check that out, man, because it's a
Yeah,
really awesome DMB tune. So
yeah, he makes some crazy music. Um, so this project will be a little bit more abstract and a little bit more complicated to explain for me, I think. So I might need your help here and there. Um, but the basic thing is, I have a couple of sounds here. I have a kick snare, I have a bass, and my pluck. And my goal was, yeah, because I'll first like, kind of explain where this project comes from. Alchemy sent me a message, and he was like, "How do you create swing in your tracks, and how come your halftime tracks just have like this rhythm or flow to it?" And then I was like, "All right, I'll show you." I went into a call with him. I set up this project, and I kind of showed him my way of handling rhythm stuff and just doing all these kind of things. So in short, this project contains templates. I gave them a different name over here. I'll explain all of these names and these little things over here later on. But every like 8-bar loop is one template. So for me, when I'm trying to get into a new genre, one of the things I like doing most is, first of all, referencing. And I can't stress enough how much referencing can actually help your own music. But more specifically, analyzing what people are doing and trying to recreate the same concept. So for me, trying to get into halftime and getting a grasp of like the swing they create, I actually went through all of my favorite tracks. I just listened to them. How are their kicks placed? How are their snares placed? How do they like complement their basses together with the amount of kicks they're using and stuff? And eventually, you'll get such an understanding of the genre you're working with that you're actually able to create some templates yourself, which work, yeah, kind of in your own music. And yeah, research. So this project is kind of like the research of my own music. So I analyzed my own music because when I'm making music, I don't really think about what I'm doing. But since Alchemy asked me, I try to analyze my own music. And these are 3 templates I used in 2 of my recent songs, and a lot of other work in progresses that never will see the light of day probably. But this is like an easy way for me to explain what I'm doing and how I do my halftime stuff. So yeah, if there are any questions, please stop me, because this might get a little bit abstract at some points and I might not be able to explain everything all too well. But yeah, then I'll start, I guess.
Um,
Mm,
so really quick before we start, sorry, I was just really trying to make sure that I let you finish your thought before interrupting you
uh,
again. Um, when you talk about referencing tracks, you kind of talked about what you're looking for when you're listening to other people, but in regards to that, I think that like a big point is that whenever you're doing these kinds of referencing, quote unquote, you try not to like copy the whole thing, try to like
no.
take maybe 1 or 2 elements out of what you're listening
Yep.
for, like even like beyond like the bass sound or something, and really focus on like taking just a single thing. So for me, one of the reasons why I reached out to DMTR was because he has an amazing sense of rhythm. And so rather than being like this, and this, and then trying to copy it on that source, we're taking a moment or taking one specific scenario and then exposing that. And that's why like this project on its own was so helpful to me, because he was like, oh, okay, well, here that is. And when you kind of look at referencing in that way, it takes off a lot of pressure of like how you're comparing your music to what it is that you're referencing. And I think that it will kind of give you a little bit of liberation, as opposed to like just doing that crazy comparison where like you're like, man, these people are so much better than me, and I'm referencing it and mine sounds like crap. Like that's not the point of referencing. It's to
Hmm.
just understand as a fundamental element or the essence of what the tune is, and then trying to figure out how to expose it in that way.
Yeah, exactly. And also, you'll notice at the beginning and at the end of the project, I have a signal disprove swing and an echo swing. These are kind of swings created in tracks that Alchemy sent me. So he sent me 2 tracks and he was like, man, I really love these 2 tracks. How did they get to this rhythm? How did they get to like this kind of swing in the track? And I was like, I'll try to show you my interpretation. And these 2 loops are basically like the research part. So this is what I'll try to do to other tracks. I don't do this anymore because yeah, once you're at a certain points, you try to stay away from referencing because you don't want to copy other people's work. But in the beginning, it's really helpful to get an understanding of a certain genre, a certain kind of rhythm or whatever. But I'll first show you how I use this in my music. So for halftime, I use 2 patterns quite a lot, and I gave them like a funny name. This pattern is like my offbeat kicks plus snare pattern, and it's just a kick heavy pattern, and this is my snare heavy pattern. So you'll see where my kicks are placed in the first part. They might be switched out with snares, and a lot of snares are added.
DMTR, before you show us this, is there any chance
Mhm.
that you could take the automation lanes off so people can have so people can see a little bit easier?
How do I do that? Automation lanes.
Just hit the little automation blue button right there.
Oh,
Yeah,
here we go.
thank you.
Whoops. Sorry. So the first beat I'll get into is my kick plus offbeat snares. I'm also going to try to implement these little things I wrote here. So if you're checking them out later, you know what they stand for. The basic principle of this pattern is, oh, I already looked this. I'll just show you like a decent grid. So my first kick and snare are both on grid, and it's only my second snare that actually accentuates the rhythm and is placed off grid. So I'll just play you the loop for a second. Oops. This pattern specifically is one I kind of recognize a lot of like halftime or experimental bass producers use. It's kind of like that. It's close to hip hop, and it also has that laid back feel. And yeah, it's just a pattern I really like a lot, and I'll explain the context in where I'll use this in a song and stuff later. So as you can see, I have not really that much kicks. I have a lot of snares going on. And I try to balance out my elements compared to my drums. So for the bass, you can see here's like minus kick plus bass, which basically means I don't have a lot of kicks playing. So there is a lot of room for more low ends. So I'll try to fill up a lot of gaps with bass. So this template basically is accompanied by a long stretched out bass notes, which just accentuate a more laid back feel. These basses also have a heavy sidechain on them in both templates, just so you know. But this is what the result sounds like. This was the second loop of the other project. So that's the main template. So you can really analyze where I put these specific kicks and snares, but like that's not really the essence and what I'm trying to get at, because you can just create kind of these templates yourself, but it's actually a fun exercise to try to balance out different elements compared to each other, instead of trying to layer and layer and layer until your track is like so filled up with stuff that it's hard to get other stuff through. So here the concept is I don't use a lot of kicks, so I have more room for sub bass, more room for mid basses to have longer stretched out notes. And then I have 2 plug layers over here. And this is where kind of the rhythm game starts to be implemented. I'll show you the first plug first, and then I'll add the second plug later on. And
just so you know, like one key concept that you did mention, but was very brief, that I want to make sure that people kind of grasp, is that you said that because you have less kicks or less percussive elements in general, you've left more space for the bass, and that pertains to the idea that you were talking about with how you balance the elements of your track out.
Yeah.
Because if you have a bunch of... Sorry, go ahead.
No. It's just I'm trying to stress that this is not like an absolute thing I always do. It's just a fun exercise to think about when you're making a track. So when you're making a track and you're kind of stuck and looking for a different perspective, this is like a funny viewpoint, in my opinion, to like look for what am I missing, what can I add. If I'm looking at my kicks, I can see I have so much room to play with. Let's just add a lot of basses. In the other template, like this is filled with kicks. Like I'm not looking to add a lot of long stretched out bass notes, because then I'll be needing so much more side chaining. There's so little room to play with.
Right.
It's just a fun exercise to do. Are we all right?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So then I have these 2 plugs to kind of, you can look at the MIDI yourself for the notes and the exact placement, because for me it's really hard to explain what I'm doing, because I'm literally just playing everything with my keyboards, and it's pretty hard for me to explain what's actually happening. So when I select this, I don't really know the exact key this track was in, so I have to check.
Looks like E.
And it's just about... Then I'll just be playing this loop over and over and play a little melody. And I'll try to explain how you can do this just with using MIDI if you're not able to like play or enhance the rhythm you're having. So these are kind of melodies I'll start playing randomly.
Did you just play Donkey Kong?
I have no clue.
It's aquatic ambience. No. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm just literally playing random stuff. I really don't know what I'm doing. So this is the one I played originally. Question. What role does percussion have in your music? Do you see it as drums, or does it even have another purpose in your tracks besides being a rhythmic element? I guess kind of both ways. I obviously use percussion as drums, because like I use the same process for my percussion as I use for my drums, which creates drum sounds. And so I'll use it that way, especially in intros and stuff. But I'll obviously use percussion also to create textures. Like, for example, in that melodic little experiment we did in the beginning, there are a lot of other ways. I'll try to use percussion just as texture layers over pads and chords and whatever. So it's not always a rhythmic element, but most of the time I would say I'd use percussion as a rhythmic element. Just because, yeah, so easy. Because most of the time it's really hard to fill in, like creating complicated rhythms is so hard just using kicks and snares, and most of the time you'll just be needing so much more other stuff to actually have the rhythm going.
I think it's safe to say that
Makes
in your
sense.
tracks you always have something that's helping
Yep,
enhance your rhythm. Like in
exactly.
this particular case, you're actually treating these plucks
Yep,
as a means of percussion. Like it has a melody or it
indeed.
has a tone to it, but
It's more the rhythmic element that actually helping my loop than the melody that's playing.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so yeah, then the little trick I showed alchemy for like, because for me it's really stupid to explain to people like how do you come up with these melodies and with these plugs and stuff, because I just play them on my keyboard and I can't really explain what I'm going through because my theory knowledge is like so like limited. um, and then I try to find like ways of how you can kind of create these same rhythms or these same offbeat flows. And as you can see, this clip is like plus minus same offset. So basically what this means is, and this is where my English translation won't be really helpful. But if I were to put a melody completely on grid, because you have to realize everything I play will be off grid because I'm just a human. I make mistakes, but I actually use these mistakes in my music um, to accentuate certain rhythms and stuff. And I just keep them in purposely in my tracks. So here I have part of the melody, which is put perfectly on time. This is not really the sound I'm going for. So as you saw, this clip is called plus minus same offset. So basically what I personally would do if I wasn't able to play this myself, I would just take this complete melody, just create a melody on grid, and offset it by like the same amount. I'll go for like, what is this, 1/16th or something?
It's kind of like a similar thing where yeah, it's kind of like a similar thing where you take like a hi-hat loop or whatever and you offset it ever so
Yeah,
slightly, which is a really common thing
exactly.
in regular swing music and drum and bass specifically, but you're just
Mhm.
taking the entire melodic loop and then
Yeah.
just shifting it off a bit.
So you would apply this to the complete loop, but I'm just too lazy to put them all in time and then put them off time again right now. So I'm just showing this with the first note, and it's just about experimenting. You can even pull off your grid and just find a specific spot where it
Yeah.
just sounds offbeat enough, but not that the rhythm is actually clashing with everything else.
There's definitely a trial and error aspect to this.
And when you get really microscopic, you can just like go into individual notes and start pushing them around if you actually want to speed up or slow down your melody and stuff. Yeah, it's just an example. So that's the main concept, having your like your melody played out on grid and then offsetting it by the same amount. And then this last plug is just a percussion, but it acts kind of as a texture layer to my first plug. The reason why I add this last plug is to enhance the rhythm I have going on in my first plug. So as you can see, this is called little later than, and then an arrow upwards, because it's basically just a copy paste. I just took this clip, select, oops, I took the clip from above, I select everything again, and just do the same process over. So as you can see, these notes are offset by a certain margin. I'll try to offset them again by the same margin as before.
If any of you guys know what are familiar with drumming, this is kind of like creating a phlegm effect.
Exactly. And basically what that does, it creates like the laid back feel you hear in most halftime music. for me anyways, that's how I use it. I'll show you other examples, like in Eccles track, they use a completely different technique. But this is how I would implement plugs, percussion and stuff in my music to create like a laid back feel. Like I said earlier, I won't do this myself, like the offsetting my plugs and stuff, because I'm playing everything live. Would you use that technique with kick? You can use this with anything, son of Elroy. It just, if it works, it works. You could. The thing is, my drums, my snares, my basses, everything. I just play the stuff on my keyboard, so I don't really think about offsetting specific things when I'm making a track. But it's like my playing has all these things implemented into it. So if you were to kind of replicate what I'm doing with just pressing my kicks and snares on my keyboard, you would just have to offset them manually in this manner.
And one
That
one
makes sense?
particular guideline on that note is that while there are definitely no rules, one thing that will be helpful when you're experimenting with this is like, put your kicks and snares whatever you want, but on like at least the one of the bar, and usually like
Mm-hmm.
probably just like the downbeat, probably put a kick on grid on that particular point. Or you can do like the first beat is on grid, and then on the second bar the first beat of that is off, but you generally have to have something that's going to keep the rhythm of the entire tune before you kind of like push it back too far. And it's not to say that
Exactly.
like you have to do that, but it you'll be I feel like you'll be a lot more successful if you set it up in that way first, and then kind of like push your boundaries with what you feel like you can get away with.
Mm-hmm. And also the other examples from Eckel and Disprove, they're they have used kicks that are completely offset and offbeat and stuff, and I will show you an example of that and how you can implement putting like stuff offbeat and try to resolve them back into the grid at a certain point, because it can be fun to play around with offsetting stuff, but there always has to be like a point where you're back on grid and you're able to catch the rhythm again, because
Right.
when your rhythm is going so far off, it will be really hard to kind of dance to or feel the rhythm or whatever. You always have to have that point where everything makes sense and kind of flows nicely. Yeah, just wanted to say that.
No, no, yeah, yeah, definitely, totally agree.
um, then I'll go to the second template, which is offbeat kicks plus snare. So it's like the reverse stuff. This makes use of a lot of kicks and like a less amount of snares. As you can see, my low end is way more occupied compared to my first templates. This is why I'll be using shorter bass notes, which start at my first kick, play until a snare, start at another kick, and play until another kick. Like, you have to kind of think about this as there are markers everywhere my kick and my snare starts. I'll try to kind of place my kicks from a kick to a snare or a kick to a kick, here a kick to a snare, etc. And so I kind of used shorter bass notes to accompany the rhythm of my kicks.
So sick, man. Like it just blows my mind. Like because of how well you set up this rhythm with three elements, like it already sounds like is strong enough to stand on its own with like a
Mm,
limiter, of course, like making it like like normalized and louder or whatever,
yeah,
But I think that's part of the reason why I wanted you to talk about this so much is because if you get your elements correct, like you don't need hundreds of billions of tracks to establish the rhythm. It all kind of starts from these
exactly.
foundations.
And like I said, this is for me. It's like in the beginning, it's really hard to grasp and to do this all right. But I feel like when you spend enough time, and like I said, this doesn't go only for halftime. I would do this with any new genre. I would try to put my focus on. I'll try to look at other people's tracks, get like four elements going, and create a complete same rhythm as them, and just to get an understanding of what they're doing. For the plugs, just same process. I would just put the melody on time, select all, offset them by a certain margin. For these plugs, copy paste. Here we go. Select them all, offset them again by a certain margin. This is too much. As you can see, you can hear it when the plug is actually trying to drag down the rhythm instead of going along with it. A little more. There we go. But yeah, it all adds to that laid-back feel and the laid-back motion you've got going on.
Definitely.
So yeah, these are the two main templates I wanted to show you. Yeah, I'll just explain how to use them in a track. How I use them in a track, and I'll showcase you how I implement these. So I have two templates. One thing I want to say before I hop into a next project, and we'll come back to this later, is because I have a lot of kicks here. In my personal opinion, this is the loop that carries the most energy. So because I'm having so much low end and my low end is varying quite a lot, I feel like this has much more energy compared to this laid back feel with the long stretched out bass notes. Just a thing I want to point out right now, because you'll notice what it actually means when I'm looking into a new track. So right now I'm opening the project for Cision. It's a track I released on a friend of mine. So that friend of mine, his artist name is Blanco. He started a new label called Abyssal Music, and I submitted Cision as his first release. It's a free download on his label.
So cool, man. Congrats on that.
Thank you. And yeah, I'll be sending more work to him probably whenever I have more stuff finished and stuff. But it takes a bit to open this project because it's kind of big. So here we are. The organization isn't perfect, but for me what counts is the composition and more the swing elements I showed you earlier. So I'm gonna make sure I have nothing enabled here. Yep, there we go. All right, so I'm just gonna play this from the build-up, and you have to really think about the templates I showed earlier. So you have one template with a lot of kicks and one template with lesser amount of kicks and longer stretched out notes. And you'll see I used both of these templates. The first drop will be more kind of up tempo and carries more energy because the rhythm is different. And the second, the switch up, is way more laid back because it makes use of stretched out bass notes. So if you kind of paid attention to like the first project I showed, you can notice that my first drop completely like consists of like the kick heavy pattern. So you'll notice a lot of kicks with shorter bass notes, which carries more energy. And towards my switch up, I'll be switching to kick, like lesser amount of kicks with lower stretched out notes, which kind of carries the energy downwards into the breakdown. So this is like the swing philosophy behind this particular track. For the second drop, I used the kick heavy pattern again because I wanted to end on a high note and carry a lot of energy and kind of have a blast. So I'm gonna show you the second drop quickly and we'll move to the next part.
Super cool, man. Such a slammer.
Hey. So yeah, that's how I personally used those templates.
And this is
the Reese is gigantic.
And this, correct me if I'm wrong, but like when we first talked about this, like that's something that you generally lean towards pretty often, right? Those two like rhythmic structures.
Yeah. When I'm creating like how do I say this? When I'm creating like just the not really generic, but like the normal halftime music. I like to tend to use these templates a lot. So when I'm creating like heavy, like halftime music, more used for in clubs and stuff, I'll try to use these templates. For my experimental side, everything is thrown out of the window and it's just all experimenting and finding new wonky things.
Right. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you're working on an experimental EP right now, aren't you?
Exactly. But like I wanted to show these things first and foremost because like my the songs I have out right now are all like in this kind of era of stuff. So it's all with the templates and me experimenting with halftime and stuff.
Yeah.
But to give explanations on how I make my experimental music, it's so much harder for me to like get concrete information and analyze what I specifically did because every track is so different and it's like
definitely
journey
and I think that like this topic that you covered in particular is something that I don't know of anybody else that has mentioned this other than like some people like Slink and all that have talked about like the idea of swing, but for actual like halftime music of this specific genre, to my knowledge, you're the only person that really does that. And so that's why I think this is really important for people to kind of be able to watch, and that's something that I think is going to stick with a lot of viewers, whoever is lucky enough to come by something like this.
Yeah, exactly. I'm quickly going to get another track of mine up and ready to compare. Oh, I don't need this. So here is a little variation because like these are two main templates, and like Elke said, I use these in quite a lot of my recent tracks, but that doesn't mean I'll like copy paste these templates exactly as they are. And I just want to show you one type of variation I used in my remix for LOJ. So here is the original template with low amount of kicks and a lot of snares. And I basically simplified the whole rhythm down with even less kicks and less snares, because my second switch up in the remix has like a fun little thing going on with my plugs, which is just me going down the whole scale every note, and it was just me having fun, and I thought, yeah, why not make something funny out of this? But it ended up sounding pretty decent, and then I accompanied with this with like a simplified version of this template. And I'll show you the example in my track. I'm not sure if they can hear this, but I'm gonna try to play something from SoundCloud. I hope this isn't too loud. Oh god damn it. Advertisements. Oh, there we go. Can you hear this on stream?
Yeah, it's playing.
Alright. Alright, quick
Fuck.
quick show. This is basically this template. So if you listen closely, you can just find all these templates in my tunes. Here I kind of keep the same pattern, but as I explained earlier, so in my track Cision, I used the kick-heavy pattern to carry the energy. Now I'm trying to put a focus on the snare-heavy pattern, which is obviously more laid back, but I'm trying to accompany this with a lot of heavy mid-basses to kind of give it that energy it lacked in my Cision track. And then what I'll do is have this simplified version of this template in my last switch up to carry down the energy. So I always try to enter my breakdown with like a lesser or a less energetic version of my first drop, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's because I think that like between, I guess for this, for your intentions rather, I think that would be the best way to place it, is that when you're trying to control the energy, if you just have a variation, like there's different ways that you can treat it, but for you and your goal is you had something that's really high energy, and then to kind of help lead things into the narrative of the tune, you have something that kind of is still kind of along the same vibe, but allowing or kind of almost signaling the listener that a break is coming up.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's why I have these templates and create like simplified versions of them or like overcomplicated versions of them and stuff. But here the simplified version is used here in this last switch up. can see, it kind of acts as that like layer that transitions from my high energy stuff to carry it down into my breakdown.
Yeah, that's super cool.
So that was a little example. And like I said, I think you can go through any of my tracks I have out right now and just scroll through these templates and find them just by listening to it.
That's cool, man. And that's really like, I think that's a really really important thing, and like that I don't think that showing us that parallel is, how do I say, like I really hope that people are able to make that connection, because it goes beyond seeing in context, because really like you kind of just gave us the overall like mindset about how you create tracks, because really like these two templates of, while they're not, you know, every track that you make, like because you understand rhythm in such a way, like it's so easy for you to create a really strong foundation on that. And, that's something that I really admire about your music, is that you have such a strong sense of this rhythm, that even though you have a lot of template or a lot of songs that copy this template in one way or another, or you know amalgamate it, it still sounds so different every time, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's just a nod to your artistry in itself.
And for me, like the most important thing to have this project out there and be people being able to download this stuff is basically to try this like kind of philosophy or like this method out for themselves, because I feel like this could benefit a lot of producers who are like in a situation where they kind of want to make certain genre, but they're so uncomfortable with getting into it and just don't know how to get started. And I feel like this is such a nice way to being playful about it, but still learn so much from just trying to create rhythms, sounds, just by referencing and looking what other people are doing.
Well, sometimes it's hard to like identify the essence of what it is,
yeah,
you know.
of course.
Like I think a lot of like I get a lot of questions of people that are like, well, what is you know, what defines this genre, what defines this genre? And of course at the end of the day, like it doesn't really matter, but I know that people care about it because they're trying to figure out what that is. And so like
exactly.
I think for this kind of music of Halftime in particular, like you have done such a good job of exposing some of the things that make it up, of like each component, but also how they're put together in such a way, because it goes beyond just the heavy drums, the heavy bass, you know, the heavy whatever. It's arranged in a certain way that gives it that laid back feel that you talk about, that particular groove. And honestly, in my opinion, that is the most important thing about this genre, is achieving that almost like Jay Dilla type of swing, except with really heavy elements, you know.
Yeah, I completely agree. And then there's like one thing left I think I certainly wanted to talk about, and that is the last two templates. I'm not sure if I can play these tracks on stream or if they will kill the VOD. Otherwise, we'll just have to link up the original track, because I can explain what's going on just by these templates.
So this song that he's getting ready to show us is Wendell from Signal and Disprove, and I think, was it Order, I want to say?
Yeah.
Signal and Disprove for sure. So you guys can go look that up for reference. And then I think what was the Echo track in the Palms of a God?
Yeah, in the Palms of a God. So Swindle by Signal, Disprove. I'm gonna put it in chat for a second for those who want to listen to the original. Whoops, I just reversed them. So Disprove, Signal, Swindle, and Echo will be later. So Alchemy sent me two tracks. He was like, how in the name of God do they create rhythms or swings like this? Or Swindle. Oh yeah, there we go. And I just used the same elements I used for my templates and just applied the same concept. And this is like how it sounds. The loop. And how I would treat these kind of like experiments is as the following. So I would look first at their kick and snare placement. And if we go into the grid, you'll notice that almost all of their snares are on the grid or close to being on the grid. But actually, the laid back feel comes from this second kick, which is put like completely off grid. And I think it's even like offset even by a larger amount in the original one. But for the sake of simplicity, I just put them in quickly. So yeah.
DMTR, I'm so sorry. Hold on for 1 second. I think that I am going to just I'm going to play like 4 seconds of this just so that people have
Oh yeah,
some
for
kind
sure.
of context, and it's going to be hopefully short enough to where it won't interrupt the VOD or whatever. But just for what
Great.
he's talking about, take a listen to this. So that's kind of what we're working on right now in this particular case.
All right, so the first thing I showed was so the kick and the snare placement. And then like the big thing in this track particularly is the placement of your bass notes. So I explained this to Alchemy too, like they try to mimic the kick and snare placements in their basses, but it's not really that like, yeah, how do I explain this correctly? So in my plugs, I said I like took one melody and just put it off grid. So it's kind of like the same technique they used on some parts of their of their basses. So as you can see, these first two bass notes accentuate the first two kicks. So you have, and then you have your snare, which kind of cuts the rhythm in half. And then you have your little bass riff. It's just random. I don't know why I played that specific one. But then you'll notice your next two kicks are already playing, but you see your bass notes actually follow the same pattern, but are just way too late. So it creates like a laid back feel. Your kick and snare are playing a certain rhythm, but your bass actually kind of gets behind because your melody is still playing over here. So you have, and then here this short kick is like an indicator or of we need to catch up with our beat, because as you can see, if we were to copy paste this gap over here, you'll see that our next bass hit would be on our snare. So this rhythm will actually be way later, and the track will just get completely lost. So you can look at this loop as in like a 2-bar loop, where your first bass hits are on the grid, your second bass hits are late because of the melody we're playing. Then we go to the next loop. We have only one kick in the beginning, so we have only one bass note playing in the beginning. And then just the basic principle, the melody and our bass notes are late, but here we used these kicks kind of in a funny way. So instead of having your kicks on the beat, he actually copied the rhythm of his basses to his kicks in this part. And then it just ping pongs between these two. So it goes from kicks on grid to kicks off grid to kicks on grid to kicks
And
off grid.
it's so crazy because like it's actually like an illusion, right? Because when you're just listening
Yeah,
to the drums of it, it seems like the drums are still in time, but
exactly.
what's really happening is like he's created, and you specifically have recreating this, has created that call and response by offsetting that a little bit and then catching it back up and then offsetting it and catching back up.
Yeah, and you have to look at this as like a funny play between kicks and bass. Like your snare is just doing the most normal thing in the world, but it's actually your kick and your bass creating this kind of swing. So you have your kick and bass playing together, you have your bass being way too late, you have them play together again, and then you'll have your bass playing late, but your kicks are like, wait, I'm actually going to be late as well this time, and it creates like a fun little loop. yeah, that's like, this is how I would treat these kind of templates or experiments for my own music. So I would be like, I notice the play between the kicks and bass, and then I would go into my own projects or start a new one and be like, how can I implement this into my own music? So I can maybe have a bass playing together with a kick. My bass comes late in the second part, and then I'll have my kicks catch up in the third part or something.
Right.
And then my fourth part is just a regular beat. And this is how I would implement these things myself. So yeah, that's the signal in this proof swing. Any questions or anything I should point out?
Um, no, I think just one more quick thing to kind of take note on that is like I think that when we're talking about like making a bass line with kicks and snares and stuff, it's a very common practice to leave or to have your particular bass play along with your kick because it kind of makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the note selection, and then also just because of the rhythm itself, like you don't actually have to limit yourself to doing that.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's I would just highly recommend trying out these little techniques. And like I said, it's not when I'm listening to a track and when Alchemy send me like, how do you create a track like this? It's not like I'm dissecting every little element that's going on. I'm just trying to look at the essence of why does this sound the way it sounds. And I'm going to show you a second example of the echo swing. And it's just, most of the time, it's just one little technique or one little thing they're doing that just makes the whole track sound like, hey, it sounds so offbeat, or yeah, it's so special.
Yeah, this one blew my mind. Let me go ahead and play just a piece of this tune really quick. Echo. Okay, that's not coming up. No results found for Elkel.
Oops.
Okay, here we go. I'm just going to play a short snippet of this. So this is the second rhythm that we're going to look at. Okay, I got to remind myself not to listen to the whole thing. But yeah, that's kind of what we're looking at right now.
So in the track, when I heard it at first, I was like, yeah, this is definitely some kind of perk or pluck that's like carrying the whole rhythm. So that's actually what I'm gonna try to analyze for you, and just look at how he implemented it a little pluck. So here is the beat. I just tried to mimic the same kick and snare pattern. At first I was like, yeah, there's not really something special going on with the beat itself. So I'm just gonna play it and then I'll explain what he did with the pluck and how it's kind of makes sense. So it's a pretty like simple kick and snare pattern, but then the whole rhythm is actually carried by this pluck. I think someone showed me some kind of, yeah, he was like, he had a word. If someone knows the exact word for this technique, just put it in chat because I can't recall the name exactly. But this is like a different technique compared to mine. So when I showed you my plucks, I have a certain melody and I offset them by the same amount. So that's why I specified that it's the same offset for every little note over here. In the echo tune, there is a little different thing going on, and I'll show you here. So as you can see, I'll try to explain with the grid. So this is where our first like plucked note is supposed to hit. And you can see it's offset by a little amount. Then we go to our next note. It's supposed to hit here in an like perfectly on grid scenario, and it's offset by a bigger margin compared to our first note. If we go to our third note, it's even further away from the ideal spot. And as you can see, every note is getting further and further from that initial like place where it's actually in an ideal world supposed to hit or something. and it creates like a slow pulling effect on your melody. So I'll just play the first part. So it's getting later and later and later and later. Then the fun thing is he implemented this note right here, which is perfectly on grid, which basically acts as like a reset button for the melody. So he implements this note and then he starts going the slower train again. So little offset, a little bit more.
This is nuts.
Yeah, and like these are like remotely the same, but they're actually supposed to hit like even further away. And it's basically like the same process over here. So he has like this melody that's going slower and slower. He has this one little note over here, which acts as like a rhythm reset or something. And then he starts going the thing up again. And yeah, that's basically the whole rhythm and what carries the beat, in my opinion. So yeah, that's the trick he used with his plug. And it's very interesting to think about.
Yeah, like when you start thinking about like beat divisions and grids and all that, as long as it resets and it becomes a pattern, then it's almost like the time becomes more and more irrelevant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the funny thing is, like, the track has so much diversity going on, and I was like, what element like surprised me the most? And I was like, yeah, definitely the plug, because this is a technique I haven't used myself ever. So yeah, I'm definitely going to try this out at some point to just have a melody being slower and slower and slower, and then catch up on a beat and just repeat the whole thing again. Because it's so fun to get these little techniques out of other people's tracks and just try to do your own stuff with it.
And not just that, but like, you know, you can also take this idea, just of manipulation of time, I think would be the best way to describe it, and just kind of see like what else you can do that with. And how, like, we say this in martial arts all the time, but once you learn a structure, then you start to learn the different ways that you can break it without it, you know, becoming broken, if that makes sense.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
I think that, you know, one thing that is really cool about your artistry and your ability to just the kind of ear that you have is you do a really good job of exposing those things that these people have done that, you know, even for me, you know, I analyze music all the time, but I don't think that these are things that I would have caught myself had you not explained them to me. At least
And
not as
yeah,
easy as you did.
and the fun thing about this is that like there is so much knowledge being shared, especially on Twitch and YouTube, and I'm like a sponge absorbing every bit of information I can find, and it's just in my own productions, I'm literally not thinking about anything I've ever learned. So it's like a on and off switch. I try to turn it off when I'm producing, but then when people ask me how do you do your stuff, I have to actually turn on all my knowledge and stuff and whatnot to actively explain it, because a lot of these things are happening subconsciously for me. So these kick and snare things, these plugs and everything I explained, that's all stuff that's happening subconsciously when I'm producing. I'm not really thinking about the stuff. I'm just playing and experimenting and having fun. So watching or looking at this with a more critical perspective can be really helpful to get other people involved in this kind of music and how to get started. And yeah,
Right.
that's why I wanted to show this specific template and project. And reminder, you can grab this for free on Alchemy's Discord.
Yeah, it's already up. So I really wanted to make sure that you guys had this. And before we did this podcast, when he first showed me this project, I was like, so can I do a video on this, or can we share this in some way? And I think that like choosing the podcast choice was probably the best way to do it, because I wanted people to know like where this came from. Not to necessarily even say that you made it up, but just because, well, I didn't come up with it, and it's something that I think is not necessarily unique to your artistry, but something that is a big part of yours. And I really wanted to make sure that they heard it from you, and then maybe I could have helped to explain or elaborate on some of those ideologies, you know. But
Yeah, exactly.
man, like this was so like, even just hearing it again, it's actually really cool uh, to have had the pleasure to have you show me this, and then we look at it
Mm.
again, and now I have a lot more confidence at like what I'm looking at.
Yeah,
But like I said, man, like this whole entire podcast of the things that we talked about and showed, I really feel like is a gold mine, and I really just want to thank you for taking the time to show everybody this.
that's no problem. Like yeah, like I said, these are just a couple of things I like to implement. For this podcast, I was like, what things can I combine in like one manner that sounds like half decent? And I just took a couple of elements and hope these are helpful to someone.
They're
Yeah,
definitely helpful to me. So yeah, man, that was it's so cool, man. Thanks again so much. But before we head out, a couple things that I want to ask, and maybe I'll kind of open up this queue to see if anybody else has any questions. But the
sure.
first thing that I kind of want to come across is so we talked about your EP for your experimental album, but like where are
hmm
you at with music right now? Like what are you what are you going for, and like where do you want to grow? Do you want to try to refine this? Do you want to try a different direction, or just I'd just like to know your thoughts on music in general.
So my music has been evolving rapidly, first of all. So I'm trying to kind of, first of all, get a grasp of what's happening with my music because it's all going so fast, and I'm kind of losing track of where I'm going with my music. So first of all, I'm trying to do that. Um, but for me, my main focus is getting into um, really experimental music, which is hard to label under certain genres. Because for me, I would like to create music that's like really special in some way, like everyone, of course, but I don't want to be able to analyze my own tracks with these templates, for example, and be like, this is what I used here, and I used the same template over there or something, you
Right.
know? So I just want to create tracks you have to look at individually, because there is no way I can explain how I did them. Um, yeah, when you look through my other tracks. So that's my main goal. Um, and of course, I'll be making halftime beats and do this stuff, of course, because I find it really fun, and yeah, there's so much to explore there, sound design wise and whatnot. But my main focus will be experimental music, doing stuff out of the ordinary, and try to come up with new things, and hope all my inspirations I've ever had combine into like one new kind of style, my own style, I hope. Yeah, that's what I'm going for currently. That's also the main goal of my EP. It has to be like a stepping stone to my future self, in some way. So it's like a showcase of all my inspirations, and then from that point on, I'll try to expand on everything I've done
Sounds
ever.
awesome, man. And I think that it's cool because like even though you're so many light years beyond me in this particular world, I think that like seeing the eye to eye on like taking things in an experimental way and then figuring out maybe how to reintroduce some of these solid ideas that you've already kind of come up is a really fantastic direction to pull things
Mhm.
like because it diversifies us, and it creates variation and it keeps things interesting. I think is the big point. Because if
Yeah,
you
for
just do
sure.
the same thing over and over again, then I think that you'll eventually get burnt out. Or maybe some people don't, but I would.
Yeah, I really don't see myself just using these templates and just making halftime beats forever. I was like, I need something refreshing, something where I can just go into every aspect of rhythm and melody and narrative and all these different kinds of stuff. And yeah, I just try to experiment as much on every front,
Right.
and that's the
Um,
goal.
Avin says, "What's your favorite beverage while producing?"
I don't really drink a lot when I'm producing. I think most of the time I drink water when I'm producing, actually.
That's probably the best, or
That's it.
some kind of electrolyte rich drink.
Mm.
I choose coffee, but that's just that's an Avin and I thing.
Oh boy.
But I also like really just enjoy coffee as a beverage. Like even before we started, I was late and I still went and made a cup of coffee. So sorry about that.
Mhm.
I needed it. I needed it.
No problem. No problem.
But yeah. Do any of you guys have any other questions, or is there any other kind of thing that you? Actually, yeah, I do have one more question for you. Is there anybody in particular that you'd like to shout out, or any artists that you're paying attention to that might not be well
Mm,
known to us?
um, Good question. Yeah, of course, Twitch sets themselves. They all deserve a lot more attention, in my opinion. But for artists, I personally know um, there is one guy, a friend of mine. He's he's doing a lot of beat related stuff like hip hop beats and stuff, and I'm not really sure what his personal music endeavors are, but he's called 2CB. Just put it in chat. And then there is one more artist, the vocalist Hazen I showed earlier.
Mhm.
I really don't know about her. I just love her music. She makes dark pop music, works with a lot of neuro producers and drum and bass producers and whatnot.
Yeah, she
And
has an awesome voice.
yeah, and I'm just so captivated by the music she makes. She has been an enormous inspiration for this experimental EP, even if it's not related to anything I'm doing personally. But it
Yeah.
just it
I,
sparks my imagination for some way.
Funkmod says, do certain swings work better to different PPMs? For example, 140, 160, 172.
Good question. I actually think it doesn't really matter that much, my BPM, to be honest. I used for these two templates, for example, I used them at like every BPM, 170, 160, 150, I think even 130. There are, of course, certain swings that might have more energy at certain BPMs and less energy at other BPMs.
Right.
But it's just the nature of the track. So if you have a high energy template at 170, when you slow it down, it will actually be lower energy because it's slower. But when you like double time this template, it will carry more energy in a lower BPM because there will be even more stuff happening. So it's like balancing out all these different things. But as I said, I don't actively think about these things when I'm starting a tune or when I'm doing my stuff. Just try to get some kind of grasp into my head what I could be thinking or what I could be subconsciously doing.
I'd
This is
almost,
I
yeah, I'd almost argue though that the faster the BPM, the more swing you can get away with,
yeah
because when you have too much time in between a rhythmic element, that's when you start to lose something, right? You start to lose the
yeah
tempo. Whereas, like, if you have something that's hella swingy at 172, like, you hear the refresh, that, yeah, you hear the rhythm refresh comes at a much quicker pace, so it's a lot easier to catch on to what you're getting away with in general.
and to go further into that, like Adam Neely's video about what is the slowest tempo we can play in was a great example of when things are just getting so far apart from each other, we actually don't think of them as one rhythm or one loop. They're actually perceived as two different things. So, like the more, or the less space you have, like the more swing or whatever you can create with it in my opinion.
Right.
So,
And then again, like above all that, just above perception and stuff, like it really
mhm.
is just all about context, which you already said,
Yeah.
but just to kind of, close the coffin on that one. It honestly, like, I think just as far as like ease of use or whatever, there's a particular degree, but when push comes to shove, it's always about the context of the tune that you're making.
Mhm.
And so there is no right or wrong. It's just what sounds good to you,
Yep.
and what you're going for, and whether or not it represents what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and it's all just like everyone has different preferences. So for me, these templates did a great job, but for other people, they might sound like shit. So it's you have to, yeah, kind of. It's like I'm sharing a workflow. I'm trying to, or maybe used. I'm not really sure if I use this workflow exactly, but I'm trying to give an insight into my head, and just show how I handle things. And you can apply the same concepts to any other genre, any other beat, any other swing. And I'm just trying to get people to experiment and do weird stuff, and yeah,
Yeah,
not
definitely. This was
just be
definitely.
limited to.
Yeah, for sure. It was. I'm sorry. I thought you were done with your thought.
No problem.
But it was definitely like an intro to your workflow of like, like you said, of like how you make music, and having a little piece of this is something that we can all put in our pockets and use to further enhance, our
Hmm.
creative endeavors of, trying to either get past beat block or trying to create something new or trying to achieve a specific sound that, some of us have been trying to, acquire, like myself, for years. Because to you, I think that this is something that comes natural. Not to say that you didn't have to work for it, but for me,
Hmm.
I feel like I struggle a lot more with this, and it's a place that I want to be comfortable with. So at least, even if I can't implement these ideas, I now have something to practice, and I have a reference to draw from. Aside from being able to, reach out to you personally and ask you questions about it, but this is
Yeah,
such
for
a
sure.
good framework of how to acquire something in that sense. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yep, I'm completely agree.
But yeah,
Uh,
man, I think that's probably good for us. I just
yeah,
want to really take the time to, again, thank you so much for being here. I had a great time, and I'm sorry for the potential crisis that almost happened.
it's no
I
problem.
was going to be really upset if I couldn't make this work out, because I feel like this is something we've been talking about for doing for a really long time. Um, but yeah, man, I want you to know that you're appreciated. That I love your music personally, and thank you so much for just being a part of my community, because you've definitely brought just so much to that.
Yeah, and I mean it goes both ways because I'm so thankful for being here, being able to share all these fun little things, and also the people in the community, like, and even the Twitch community as a whole. They're like, my music has come to this point thanks to all these people. Like, I wouldn't be doing these explanations if I didn't open Twitch like 1.5 years ago and look up the Whittler or something. Like,
Right?
I didn't end up in the same uh, like position as I'm right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm super thankful for having me. Thankful for all the people in chat, and I hope
S-
this was helpful.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thank you. And if you guys are part of the community, you guys can all, Pete or DM him on Discord, and then, ask him questions. Try not to. Oh crap! Hold on 1 second. Yeah, before we go, find him on Discord or DM him. Be respectful about it, because he is trying to make his own music and stuff too. But if you haven't seen it on the banner, can you tell us where to find you and find your music?
Um, so my music is at SoundCloud. Yeah, DMTR Beats. I think everything of my social stuff is DMTR Beats. My Bandcamp, Twitch, Facebook. Um, it's all just DMTR Beats, lowercase. Uh,
Yeah,
after each.
awesome. And if you guys can, go show him some love, and, just go support his music, because, it takes a lot, and it takes, he didn't have to do this for one, but two, we got some really good information, and I think that he cares just as much about the community as I do. So show him some love,
Yeah, for sure.
go follow him on SoundCloud. Seriously, it's criminal how little followers he has, both on Twitch and on SoundCloud as
Really?
well. And I think that, like, recently, like, you've kind of been expanding a lot more.
Yeah, but it's also because people are like sharing me around, and like I'm super thankful for that. But I just want to uh, before my EP, I'm like very conservative about how I share my music and stuff because I don't really want to draw too much attention yet. Because for me personally, it feels like I'm not at that level I want to be, or I want to be known.
I don't know
That
if
makes
we're
sense.
ever gonna feel at that level,
Yeah, for sure.
but I
Um,
understand
when
what you mean.
yeah, if I have that EP released, I'll be more confident, I think, to be able to show my music and be like, this is the artist I want to be, and this is where I'm going with my music. And yeah,
Funkmon says it never ends. Totally agree. And yo, guys, by the way, I think what is it, March 28th? Funkmod, DMTR, and I are actually going to be on Musar's
Oh
podcast,
boy.
producer roundtable. I have no idea what to expect, but he's just going to be hanging with us and talking about things. So if you guys want to hear more information, or I don't like again, I don't know what topics he's going to cover, but we'll be at a position to where we're all going to be having an awesome discussion. And then I think sometime next week, Musar or I myself might either be on his podcast or mine, just because we want to have conversations, and that's really what I wanted to do in the first place was get everybody talking and sharing ideas and sharing information. And if you guys are producers and you guys feel like you're at a level where you have something to share and you'd like to teach us something, then check that out on my Discord where you can fill out the form and we can kind of have a discussion from there. I can't promise you that I'll pencil you in the schedule because I have a million things going on right now, but that doesn't mean that I don't want you or that I don't want to at least get to that point at some potential point in time. But yo, DMCR man, thanks again.
Yeah,
You're
no
super
problem.
awesome. Give me some time to upload this to YouTube, but I got to edit some stuff
For
out because we
sure.
had some technical difficulties, which I apologize for. But yeah, man, I really appreciate everything. I appreciate the chat, and I can't wait to do this again with either you or the next artist, or get together and
Hmm.
just continue talking about music because that's what it's about.
For sure. Yeah, I'm always available, and I'm sure there are a lot of other people who are able to share a lot of their knowledge, even though they might not be streamers or anything.
Right.
I feel like it's just the community is so knowledgeable on so many different aspects, and there's always something you can learn from anyone. So, yeah,
Always something.
super stoked.
Well, thanks, man. I think before we go, let's see if